The cost of these two IEMs could buy me the latest iPhone with the highest spec possible and still have change. Yeah, I'm way too deep into this hobby now. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another comparison video where I'll be putting a newcomer in the Summit Fi IEM club, the Fatfreq Maestro SE against the legendary Sony's IER Z1R. Two IEMs which has one of the, if not the best bass presentation in an IEM today. But there is a difference between the two, so let's find out if the SE can stand toe-to-toe with the legend or could it topple the king. Before we talk about sound, let's start by talking about their accessories first. In the Sony's package, you get 13 ear tips, 2 interchangeable cables, a 3.5 and a 4.4mm termination, a case, all in this big box which gives you a very premium unboxing experience. The Fatfreq, on the other hand, just comes with this standard plastic case which they're calling the Fat Box, silicone ear tips in different sizes, a pair of foam tips, cleaning tools, earplugs, and a stock cable that is unworthy of an IEM with this caliber. Thankfully, you can upgrade the cable, but it will set you back another $150. But this upgrade cable just completes the look of the Maestro SE, and the interchangeable termination is a lot more functional and user-friendly compared to the cables provided for the Z1R. For the design, if you watch my Z1R review, you know how I feel about this design. But to recap, I think this is reminiscent of the tables in a food court somewhere in my home country. Nostalgic? Yeah. Premium design? Not for me, when I have that image in my head. The Maestro SE, on the other hand, may seem less premium with the resin shell compared to a full-bodied metal shell, but that gold wording on that beautiful blue background, it looks absolutely stunning. For fit and comfort, they are both chunky and huge. The Z1R's notorious fit is possibly attributed by the hard metal shell and the size of it as well. For me personally, it just keeps falling off. The best fit I had was when I had the SpinFit W1 ear tips and the FIO cable. But it's a lot of work to get it to fit, and I have to be relatively still to enjoy the experience, which in itself ruins the experience. As for the Maestro SE, it is on the same category as the Monarch Mark II in terms of size, but compared to all of them, the Maestro SE still fits me a lot better. It stays in my ear, but I do get a little sore on this section after long hours of listening. Now let's talk about the sound. For the bass, they both present bass very differently, but both the Z1R and the Maestro SE does it exceptionally well. Both the Z1R and the SE has the slam, the impact, the bass weight, fullness, detail and texture. The biggest difference would be in the sub bass. The SE has a lot more rumble, providing a much deeper bass experience than the Z1R. The Z1R, having less sub bass, presents a cleaner bass presentation. The overall bass presentation on the Maestro SE gives me a live concert experience. It's everywhere, but it's still controlled. It sucks you into the music and you're just dancing to the beat, spiritually if not physically. Whereas the bass presentation on the Z1R feels like you're sitting in a studio and monitoring it. It's clean, it's weighty and impactful, and you're just bobbing your head because of how good it is. The only other thing I can come up with to explain how I feel with the bass on these IEMs would be something like this. Imagine the bass on the Z1R is like a professional. He's there 9 to 5. He's clean, he's well shaven, he's behaved. He's there to do a job and he does it extremely well. Then you attend a rave party on Friday night. You see the same professional, only this time glow sticks all around his body, but stuck in a uniformed manner. He's dancing, whole body shaking and moving, bobbing and weaving. He's looking wild and may seem uncontrolled, but you realize it's actually a well choreographed dance. That's the Maestro SE's bass. Okay, I'm probably making it worse now, so I'll be moving on, but if you somehow got what I mean, credits to you. For the mid-range, the Z1R has a more recessed presentation in the mid-range, while the Maestro SE has a slightly more forward presentation compared to the Z1R. If vocal prominence is a very important factor in your sound preference, then I would say that it's not the best feature on either of these two IEMs. Both IEMs have their background music brought forward due to how prominent their bass presentations are, and while the vocals are still audible, it sounds like they're on the same plane as the background music, with the Maestro SE bringing the vocals a little bit more forward. But the background music can sound like a feature, and the vocals loses its spotlight sometimes in certain tracks. Overall, between the two, I prefer the mid-range presentation on the Maestro SE with that slightly forward presentation, which gives the vocals a little bit more highlight and still being able to compete with all that bass. For treble, this would highly depend on how sensitive you are to treble. I'm personally sensitive around the 9 kHz region, so those regions may sound quite piercing to me if elevated a bit too much. Both the Z1R and the Maestro SE's treble sound clear and open, but the Z1R has a touch more air, which also helps in making the treble sound a little bit clearer and a touch sharper. Cymbal Strikes has more clarity and sparkle. It's high enough to a point where it's just at the edge of being harsh or sibilant for me, so I always get that feeling like I'm about to wince, but it never got me. So it's as good as treble gets for me. However, I'd still advise to test the Z1R first, as I can imagine the treble being a little too bright for some people. However, on certain female tracks, the elevated treble on the Z1R with that recessed presentation does make it sound a little thin. The SE's treble suits my ears better, as it's high enough to cut through the bass, but it never sounds piercing to me, so I can listen to those female tracks that I wouldn't be able to on brighter gears. For soundstage, the slightly recessed mid-range on the Z1R gives a wider soundstage presentation compared to the Maestro SE. The Maestro SE, while not as wide as the Z1R due to its slightly more forward presentation, the bass presentation does provide a sense of a deeper soundstage instead. The word holographic, which was used to market the Sony Z1R sound, for my experience, I actually had that sense on the Maestro SE instead, due to how the bass is presented. That deep sounding bass does have a more holographic effect compared to the cleaner sounding bass presentation on the Z1R. The following category probably had some influence on the soundstage as well. For imaging and details, the elevated treble on the Z1R definitely helps with the details and imaging of different sounds. The imaging on the Maestro SE is something to behold as well, but the bass details can sometimes overpower other details in the track. For example, listening to this track from Kanabun, which I believe is one of the Naruto opening songs, which has a lot of bass and electric guitars, and there's a snare drum as well. On the SE, the low frequencies were brought forward and made a feature, but it was to a point where it masked the sound of the snare drum, and it got lost in the track. Using the same song on the Z1R, the reduced sub bass and the elevated treble helps the snare drum come through all that, and it's much more audible. So I'd say in terms of resolution, the Z1R is slightly clearer than the Maestro SE, but they both present the sounds on the left and right side of your ear very well. For source, the Maestro SE requires a lot more power than the Z1R, going as far as 11 o'clock on my HiFiMan EF400, while the Z1R goes to about 8 to 9 o'clock. So in summary, this was really tough. Neither of these IEMs are quote unquote an upgrade to one another. They both present two different sounds that has their own pros and cons. On the Z1R, you have a solid, impactful, clean bass presentation with a treble that helps bring out all the details in a track. But the recessed mids may impact the vocals despite presenting a wider soundstage. On the other hand, you have the Maestro SE, which presents a bass so deep and textured, yet impactful and solid with clear imaging that makes me feel like I'm in a live concert, but with a more forward mid-range, so it stands toe-to-toe with the bass presentation without being enveloped by it. And the treble is high enough for me, but it is not as open or airy compared to the Z1R. I wish I could keep both of them. But if I had to choose between the two, if I only had to pick one, even though I really don't want to, I'd pick the Maestro SE from Fatfreq. And it mainly comes down to fit, but the sound on the SE, for me, just makes me dance to the music. Which is why I'll be selling my Z1Rs, as I've got bills to pay, and if my wife finds out I spent $4,000 on earphones, I'm going to feel the burn and it won't be on my ears. With that all said, that concludes my comparison of these two amazing IEMs, but I'm curious to know your thoughts as well. Have you tried these two IEMs yourselves, and what do you think? Share it with me in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this comparison video, please do consider hitting that like and subscribe button. That will really help grow the channel, and I truly appreciate each and every one of your support. Thank you all very much again for watching, and I'll see you on the next experience. Take care and happy listening.